can do our bird and do it bloody easy. He says it's to apply to go to a psychiatric prison. Now, there's a new prison opened at Grendon. You apply tomorrow, I'll apply tomorrow. You'll get an interview with a psychiatrist, I'll tell you exactly what to say to him, and you'll be off, you'll be in Grendon. Fair enough, we both went before the governor the following day. He done his nut mind. He said, you boys have put this up together, your mates, you want to go somewhere together, but I can't stop you applying, okay, apply. So fair enough, along comes a psychiatrist. He interviews the other chappie and he interviews me. I plead that I'm a compulsive gambler, which by this time I genuinely was, and that I felt that I didn't want to commit any more crime. I could make a living without committing crime. So anyhow, to cut a long story short, okay, he said, you should go to Grendon. The other chap was refused, by the way, but that's besides the point. So off I went to Grendon, laughing. Thought, this is it, I'm going to do my bird easy. I'd been told there's women dancing there in the nights. Everything is marvellous, you know. But anyhow, when I get to Grendon, I see this ruddy big wall, this big door, as big as any other prison in the country. I thought, well, this is it. I thought, the minute I'm inside, I'm in amongst a load of nutters. I had visions of seeing people da-da-da and people climbing up the wall, but as soon as I got in there, I went into the reception, and I think this is what struck me most. The officer in charge there said, all right, laddie, sit down, make yourself at home, have a smoke. Now, that was a surprise, because no officer had ever spoken like that to me before.
Security is not the main task of prison officers here. They're largely concerned with treatment, and the prison takes great pains to nurture sympathetic attitudes in its officers.
Right, shall we begin? Dennis, you're unlocking Ducky, and take it from there.
Here, a psychologist conducts a group of officers in a psychodrama. The officers are asked spontaneously to adopt particular roles in prison life.
Take your sodding hand off me.
Come on now, it's time to get up.
Put the bloody lights out.
Oh, don't give me so much lip. Come on, get up.
Oh, piss off, will you? You bloody screws all the same.
Give me any more lip and put you on report. Now, come on, get up.
Nicked?
Yes.
I'll give you something to bloody nick me for.
Right, that's it, you're nicked.
By playing various roles, the officers can learn to handle situations more effectively, with more understanding.
You want to see me, Gordon?
Yeah, surely, sir. Yeah.
All right, sit down. All right, Mr. West. Thank you, sir. Now then, what's the trouble?
Well, put this place on report, sir. It's right out, isn't it? You know, let's be fair, I'm the disturbed person. These screws are all the same. They come here for therapy. They're not therapists. You're the therapist. These type are not. They come here for a quiet time. Let's be fair about it.
But are you responding to treatment?
6 months ago, I fitted a piss pot over his head. What did I do? I threatened him this morning. I didn't touch him.
Well, this means what, do you think?
This means improvement. Surely I've still got 18 months to do. Tell him not to...
The prisoner persuades the therapist to let him off, so the prison officer feels resentful and expresses his frustration.
Took this bloke up to the governor this morning and all he gave him was 3 days stoppage of pay.
The idea is that by understanding his reactions, a prison officer can control his emotions and do what's best for the prisoner.
Just winds you up for nothing.
In spite of the trouble taken to train them, not all the officers agree with the prison's methods. The main criticism is of the permissiveness, that Grendon is too easy on its prisoners.
Often I've been accused by visiting officers here that I'm becoming seduced by the prison population. Well, this is entirely wrong. I'd like to name an instance of this when we had a visitor from an outside prison on our wing, and I invited him to sit in the group. On the group this day we were dealing with a sex offender. And this sex offender, we were going in quite thoroughly into his past. And he brought up a rather trivial offence that he had committed years ago. After the group had finished, this officer seemed in rather a panic that I should report this offence to the police. And I couldn't get him to understand that to do this would ruin the whole object of Grendon. That the very fact that we had got him to open up about these things was proof that we were getting him to look at himself and to what was wrong and why he did these things.
There are times when I feel that the only difference between me and an employee of Butlin's holiday camp is that they wear red coats and we wear blue ones.
A more humane psychiatrist never did in a prison exist.
The Prisoner's Yearly Review, a satire of a prison psychiatrist and of Grendon itself. But as with Grendon's magazine, art classes, plays and discussion groups, permissiveness is a necessary condition for effective therapy.
Harmless merriment. My object all sublime I shall achieve in time, to let the therapy fit the crime, the therapy fit the crime, and make each prisoner pent, reform and represent a psychologically better gent, psychologically better gent. His object all sublime he shall achieve in time, to let the therapy fit the crime, the therapy fit the crime, and make his prisoner sense, reform and represent a psychologically better gent, psychologically better gent.
There's always the question of why, you know. There's the old story about the man who goes to prison for stealing 30 milk bottles on 30 different occasions, 30 different sentences, and 2 weeks later he steals another milk bottle. So the question is why? And this is the question that most prisons don't ask, but which Grendon is constantly asking. And you don't get an answer as such, not a pat answer, not a sort of a thing that just tells you everything. It just doesn't happen like that. But what you do get is an insight into your own personality. You get an idea of how you're thinking and how you're reacting.
Contact with the outside world is encouraged more than in traditional prisons. Monthly visits are allowed to last all afternoon, whereas in most other prisons they last for only 20 minutes. The relationship between the inmate and his wife and family outside is a crucial one. Often his wife is his main encouragement to go straight. Yet paradoxically, the effect of Grendon may be such a radical one that the prisoner may emerge from Grendon a perfect stranger to his family, his personality having developed to the point where they no longer understand him. Grendon's social workers and many of the prison officers do as much as they can to help the family unit stay together.
Yeah, there's one or two more things before you go, Dennis.
A man is leaving Grendon after a prison sentence of 3 years for armed robbery. Even after years of the intensive and expensive treatment of Grendon, he gets just £4 to see him on his way. If he leaves prison on a Friday, he may have spent it all on food and a place to stay by the time he gets to the Labour Exchange on Monday.
Well, you've got a job to go to, haven't you?
Well, no, I'm going to leave the job, you know, till I'll get out sort of thing, sort it out. Well, I don't feel none too confident, like, Chief, you know what I mean? I've, as you probably know, I've done 17.5 years in prison-type institutions, you know, yes. Proof schools, ball detention centre, proper prisons. And I'm only 25 now, so the only sort of life I've ever known has been a prison-type institution life, you know, where you're fully secure, you know what I mean, from the outside world sort of thing. Your meals are found for you, your bedding's found, your clothing's found, and all this sort of thing, you know. As I say, I'm none too confident, but I think that Grendon's helped me enough to be able to cope a lot better than I used to.
You seem different when you came in, you know.
I just hope I don't let no one down, you know what I mean? My own family, myself, and people who've helped me here.
Well, you had a chance to make it.
This is it, and as I say, I think it's a chance in a million for me anyway.
Well, wish you all the best, Dennis.
I'll go down there too, and be lucky, won't you?
Yeah, don't come back either.
After I'd been at that job about 3 months, I started finding myself going back like I was before. The odd half an hour in the betting shop, then it got the odd hour in the betting shop. So I thought there's only one thing to do. Go down to Grendon, knock on the door and say, you told me to talk to somebody? You're the only people I can talk to? I've come back. Which I did. Spoke to all the boys, told them I felt I was going back into trouble. Just a chat with them was enough. Out I come, and again I was sort of rejuvenated.
Grendon has its fair share of success stories, but the exact extent of the prison's effectiveness is difficult to measure. It's not a controlled experiment. There's no exactly similar sample with which to compare the reconviction rates of those who leave. personality tests indicate that prisoners leave Grendon with less hostility towards other people and more sociability than when they came. And follow-up research shows that within 2 years, the reconviction rate seems to be less than for those leaving other prisons, especially in the case of offenders with just a few previous convictions. So the answer seems to be to admit habitual offenders to Grendon before they become too brutalised, and to employ better aftercare rather than letting treatment end at the gate. But there are many skeptics who dismiss group therapy and psychotherapy techniques for rehabilitating offenders.
I think the notion that you can rehabilitate criminals by improving their social relations, usually with other criminals, and that this is a kind of therapeutic program that would work, I think that again is probably a myth or a fairy story. The only likely event is that they will get on better with other criminals, full stop.
I'm not impressed. Certainly there is no evidence to support the idea that psychotherapy is of value in the treatment of the persistent offender. There is no statistical evidence to support this, and certainly in my own experience over the years, I'm not at all impressed that the psychotherapy I've carried out with prisoners has effectively prevented them being reconvicted. Well, psychotherapy was found to be so disappointing with sexual offenders, the rate of reconviction was so high, that we thought there must be another method whereby we could try and help these serious sexual offenders keep out of prison. Now, sexual activity is very much a conditioned reflex. One becomes attracted to blondes when one is quite young, and one remains attracted to blondes throughout one's life. In other words, blondes are sexually satisfying, and we tend to become attracted to blondes again and again because of the satisfaction which blondes give to us. In much the same way, sexual offenders become conditioned, say, to small boys or small girls and repeat the same sexual offence time and time again. Instead of talking to these men and trying to persuade them not to indulge in this immature sexual behaviour, what we tried to do was to interfere with the conditioning. And we tried to do this by blocking the physical manifestation of sexuality so that the psychological component wasn't reinforced by feedback.
Dr. Field has treated this man by injecting a female sex hormone under the skin. This is slowly absorbed into the bloodstream and blocks the physiological effects of the natural male hormone, reducing sexual desire.
Now, the greatest problem with this treatment is that it relies very much on the subjective reporting of the offender. In other words, the amount of treatment he has depends on how much his sexual feelings are being reduced. It's therefore perfectly easy for a particular man to hoodwink me as to the effect of the treatment.
At Wormwood Scrubs, they're trying to assess the effects of hormone treatment by objective physiological methods. Various pictures are presented to the subject, and the effects of these particular stimuli are observed by measuring tiny changes in sweating, the rate of breathing, and the electrocardiogram. This apparatus is still in an early stage, as it's yet to be shown that it's of any real use in predicting whether or not a man's sexual desires are still dangerous. If this can be shown, then Dr. Field believes that it might be used in the future to decide on whether a man serving life is too dangerous to be released. The ethical problems are considerable when psychologists and physiologists begin to shoulder the responsibility for deciding the length of a man's sentence. The whole issue has strongly emotional Orwellian overtones.
It is virtually a voluntary castration, this taking of hormones. And I just don't want to come back inside again.
But are there any alternative methods?
The most effective method of treatment, of course, is based on the proper theory of what is lacking. If we are right in thinking that the criminal is essentially a person who hasn't been properly conditioned, then obviously what you must do is to supply him with a sufficient number of the proper conditioned responses. This type of treatment was first introduced by a Scottish penologist, McConaughey, in Norfolk Island off Australia over 100 years ago, when he introduced what is now called a token economy.